opening episode 674 of the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear with the song Get the Shoe Phone. It's from the album Secret Audio Suspense from The Unidentified. You can find this at theunidentified.bandcamp.com and check out the Secret Audio Suspense album as well as the rest of their work when you're done listening to Monster Kid Radio. My name's Derek M. Cook. I'm your writer, host, and producer of the show, and I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to have you here every week. Are you getting tired of me saying that? I'm never going to get tired of saying it because I always am excited to have you here because I'm excited to talk about monster movies, sci-fi movies, cult film, sort of cult films, fantasy films, all of that. I love talking about these types of movies here on the show, and this week we are going to be talking about the movie 4D Man from 1959, and we're going to be talking about it with an old friend of mine, Matt Rashleigh. Matthew Rashleigh and I go way back, at least 20 plus years, and I'm just thrilled that he has been going on this journey, checking out these movies, and falling in love with them, and then I get to hear all about it. It just warms my monster-loving heart to know that movies that are older than me are still being discovered by people younger than me, and they're loving them as much as I do, if not more. So Matt Rashleigh and I are going to sit down. We're going to talk about 4D Man, but of course, it would not be an episode of Monster Kid Radio without your involvement, and that means segments sent in by parts of the Monster Kid Irregular Army, family, collective, community, whatever y'all want to call yourselves. I'm going to call you producers because you have two segments this week on the show. We've got Mark Matsky's Beta Capsule Review, where he is continuing his look through Ultraman's, amazing television run. He's doing an episode-by-episode breakdown of all things Ultraman. He's in the middle of Ultraman Ace right now, so stay tuned for that. Plus, we've got Kenny's look at Famous Monsters of Filmland, where Kenny from old Mexico goes through Famous Monsters of Filmland's entire run and finds something to talk about, usually in conjunction with what we're talking about here on the show, and he does that very thing this time around. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to Mark Massey's Beta Capsule Review, and we're going to talk about an event coming up this weekend, which I know is kind of short notice, especially since this episode isn't going out until Friday night, but that's all coming up right now.
Coming this fall, Halloween Spook Show at the House of Frankenstein.
Not for the faint of heart. 4 giant horror episodes. Monsters run live through your earbuds. Terrifying. Mystifying.
Here, in person, the monster and his bride argue.
The headless ghost cackle. The Cajun zombie murder the King's English.
Plus, these cinematic creeps will chill you to the bone. Man and Monster, Dr. Jekyll, and Mr. Hyde.
As men of science, we should be curious and bold enough to peer beyond it into the many wonders it conceals.
The evil genius of Baron Frankenstein.
Why had the world condemned me? Because I was the first man to create another living being.
Barnabas Collins, Vampire.
Do you think anyone could enjoy an existence like mine? I haven't seen the light of day in almost 200 years.
The undead but lovely Corpse Bride.
You may kiss the bride.
Witness your favorite heroes battle ghastly ghouls. Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl, The Phantom Stranger, Captain Marvel, Superman, and Lois Lane.
If you have a weak stomach, don't visit the Supermates podcast at fireandwaterpodcast.com. But if you can stand the blood-curdling terror, direct your podcatcher to the House of Frankenstein Spook Show.
Quick! Everyone, flee for your lives!
Emergency. Batman speaking. Warning all of you to brace yourselves for big news.
The biggest.
Tell them, Robin.
Holy superlatives, Batman! It's really exciting. Soon, very soon, Batman and I will be batapulting right out of your TV sets and onto your theater screens.
That's right, Robin. Our first full-length motion picture feature in color opens a whole new world of thrills. The big screen gives us more space on land, sea, and in the air. to challenge the most cataclysmic collection of super criminals ever. Their minimum objective must be the entire world.
And here are the dastardly villains. The Catwoman.
Oh, you're going to see the perfect crime when I get Batman in my claws.
The Joker.
Have you heard this one? It'll kill you, Batman.
The Penguin.
There are 2 eggs this wily bird is going to scramble. Batman and Robin.
The Riddler.
Question. Who's going to make the feathers fly and knock Batman and Robin out of the sky?
See, the new weapons in the Bat Arsenal combat the forces of evil. The Batcopter. The exploding, man-eating shark.
Holy sardine!
The relentless Megaton Magnet. The unholy Quartet secret submarine.
Fire one! Fire one!
The Batboat in action. The deadly disintegrator. The attack on the Batcave.
Holy hallucination!
You'll blast through the skies on these mad, manned missiles.
And you'll be with me, Robin, at the Bat Scanner, eavesdropping on Batman's romance. And you'll shudder at the death-dealing Polaris missiles.
Brace yourself, Robin. This could be the end. And that's just a sample of the exciting exploits ahead in our first feature motion picture.
Holy memoranda, folks. Make a note not to miss it.
Good thinking, Robin.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 13, Execution, the 5 Ultra Brothers. 2 human brothers are delivering newspapers when a terrible monster attacks them, killing the older sibling. Hokuto and Minami of Tak arrive at the crime scene where the younger brother implores them to believe his report before being whisked away by the police. Meanwhile, Tak detects the approach of planet Golgotha, which is sending out a signal calling the Ultra Brothers. Ultraman Ace breaks the speed of light in order to enter the anti-universe in which Golgotha is found. There he is joined by First Ultraman, Ultra 7, Jack, and Zoffy, who discover a set of 5 crosses with each of their names engraved at the top. It's most definitely a trap. The Yapul capitalize on the absence of Ace to unleash terrible monster Vereva on the world. The freezing conditions of Golgotha sap the brothers' strength, but using the Ultra Charge, Ace is strengthened to return to Earth. With their sacrifice complete and no power left, the 4 remaining Ultras are chained to their crosses by an unseen force. Tak throws everything at Vereva, but the monster destroys their ships, setting the stage for Ace to enter the battle. However, an image of the 4 crucified Ultra Brothers fills the sky, along with the ultimatum that if Ace continues his defense of Earth, they will be put to death. Episode 13, which hit the airwaves on June 30th, 1972, contains some of Ultraman Ace's most striking scenes, especially to Western eyes. Using symbols that Christians revere and most people recognize, the Ultra Brothers are crucified on planet Golgotha, which, a line of dialogue correctly notes, is a colloquial name for the hilltop where the New Testament says Jesus was crucified. If this had been created for Western audiences, there would almost certainly have been a public outcry, but in a country in which approximately 1% of the population is Christian, the iconography of the faith is viewed through a different lens. What's more, the fact that the Ultra Brothers are the clear protagonists and that they give up their life force to empower Ace points in the direction of the hero's sacrifice, at the heart of so many of the greatest stories ever told. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Mansky reporting.
A world-famous scientist, greatest living master of the occult, has mysteriously vanished. In his place, a huge and fearsome prehistoric monster suddenly appears. What happened to Dr. Waterman? Only one man, last to see him alive, knows. And now he finds himself in deadly peril. The weird, the unbelievable, the supernatural come alive before your very eyes in Equinox. The invisible barrier between good and evil, between light and the forces of darkness. What is the secret of the 1,000-year-old book? See 4 teenage boys and girls fight a devil cult for their lives, their sanity, their eternal souls in Equinox. In supernatural color. Equinox.
Why'd you set up the break?
Because I can use you. This machine utilizes X-ray, ultraviolet, and alpha, beta, and omega rays.
This man is a killer. Mad with dreams of fantastic power.
We're conducting experiments requiring fissionable materials.
That's atom bomb stuff. The government has that locked up tighter than Fort Knox.
You'll work for us faithfully, or you'll be turned over to the authorities. I understand there's a reward of $5,000 on your head.
No money is safe. No man is safe. Nothing stops the amazing transparent man. Into army-guarded secret government vaults he goes, stealing confidential nuclear material, holding in his unseen hands the key to world power. But the amazing transparent man wants first vengeance.
If I choke you hard enough, you'll bring me back.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radio heads. This is Kenny with a look at famous monsters of filmland. Today we are talking about 1959's 4D Man. It appeared in FM3 from April of 1959, in one of the first articles previewing a future movie. Here is what was said in the 2-page 4-photo article. 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to make ready, and 4 to grow old. This show is about a deadly 4-dimensional man. In addition to the usual measurement of width, breadth, and height, he has death. Kiss him and see the other world. Tony Harris, age 13, is credited with helping his pop, Jack Harris, dream up this kiss of death man who can walk through walls, but, vampire-like, needs the life force of others to keep himself from becoming a modern mummy. This hair raiser is by the producer of The Blob, who let Famous Monsters local reporter behind the scenes at their Pennsylvania picture-making studio to bring you the advanced photos of the Zero Man, whose transmatter touch means instant aging to friend and foe alike. Watch for this corpse maker, but don't get too close, as you value your life. In FM6 from February of 1960, an interesting gimmick was announced in the back pages. The producer of The Blob will give away $1 million to the first living person who actually performs in real life the feat ascribed to the 4D Man in the widescreen color picture by the same name. Jack H. Harris, the dynamic producer of The Blob, now amazes the world with his announcement of $1 million cash award to the person who successfully performs the feats attributed to the 4D Man. Universal International, the studio that gave you The Invisible Man and The Incredible Shrinking Man, now joins with Jack H. Harris to bring you the widescreen presentation of 4D Man, lavishly produced in color by Deluxe. In this exciting story, you will watch a man cross the threshold into the fourth dimension. You will watch him perform feats that may seem totally unbelievable, but what the 4D Man does can be done. Find out from your local theater manager when he will be playing 4D Man. He will also give you information on how you can qualify to win the $1 million cash award. Remember, your admission ticket to see 4D Man could be worth $1 million. Earlier in the same issue, the contest was mentioned with some added details. $1 million will be given away by Jack H. Harris, the producer of The Blob, and that's a blob of loot all root. To the first person who can duplicate in real life the real-life feat of the star of his latest horror feature. All you have to do to claim your million clams, what a clam bake, is to see the movie The 4D Man and do as he does. Surely some clever reader of famous monsters is capable of winning this prize. Dr. Acula tried. They locked him in a room and he broke out with chicken pox. But they disqualified him for turning chicken. Then Igor, the original Igor Beaver, tried it just the opposite way. He ran around a house till he was all in, but didn't win because he broke his neck doing it. Anyway, we wish you luck in winning the $1 million by being the first person to figure out how to walk through a wall. Just don't get wall-eyed trying. That is all for this week's look at famous monsters of Filmland. We will have more next time. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
Nothing can stop it. The Blob.
Starring Steve McQueen.
It creeps. It crawls. It's slithery. It's slimy. The Blob.
Plus Dinosaurus, both in shrieking color.
Have something you'd like to share with Monster Kid Radio? You can email the podcast at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail at 360-524-2484.
This is Count Vlad, but you may recognize me by my more familiar name, Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. In your parlance, you might call these revelations spoilers. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned. And don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
Well, listeners, you know, when I'm not trying to develop the latest in Cargonite technology, I'm watching classic and sometimes not so classic monster movies, and it makes me really happy when a dear friend of mine says, hey, I watched this one and I liked it. Not just because he gives me an opportunity to come up with some content for the podcast, but because I get to talk about a classic monster movie with a classic friend. I don't know where I'm going with this. I kind of lost the thread there. It's Matt Rashleigh. Welcome back to the show, sir.
I'm happy to be your classic friend if you're my classic friend, so that's all good.
I like it. We're talking about 4D Man from 1959, which I really like a lot. I know it doesn't get as much attention as the other genre film from this production crew, The Blob, but I really like this one. I think it's interesting. I think it's got a lot of cool stuff in it, and I love the score, but I've been aware of this movie for a while. I want to know how you came across it.
You know, I can't even recall. It was one of those, dark nights, wanting to watch something interesting, and just going to the Google machine and seeing what's out there. I believe the first time I saw it, it was on Tubi. Seeing the poster for 4D Man intrigued me right out of the gate. It looked different, it looked edgy, and I was like, why not? Let's give it a try.
Were you aware of its connection to The Blob when you first saw it?
No. I had no knowledge of its connection to The Blob or the backstory of those productions. It led me down the rabbit hole of rewatching The Blob with different perspective, and then also watching Dinosaurus because producer Jack Harris with Irvin Shorty Yeaworth made 3 sci-fi movies, and this really opened the door to exploring that.
Dinosaurus is another fun one too. I really dig that one. We've talked about Dinosaurus, and we've talked about The Blob on the show in the past, but we've never talked about 4D Man. I do want to revisit Dinosaurus at some point. I know Robert Kelly from Record All Monsters really likes that one, so I will be revisiting it at some point with him, I'm sure. But like I said, 4D Man, we've never talked about on the show. I've thought about it. I've threatened it a few times. But like I said, it's the underrated one of the 3. And I don't know why that is, other than maybe there's not like an actual monster. It's humanity is the monster kind of thing, and maybe that's the disconnect. I'm not really sure. I don't remember when I first came across this one. Maybe it got discussed on another podcast, maybe even the B-Movie Cast many, many moons ago when the world was young and dinosaurs roamed the earth. I might have heard about it there. But I don't remember. I just remember when I first saw it, I kind of fell in love with it for a number of different reasons.
Yeah, me too. When I watched it, I was so blown away with how great it was. I think that was part of my excitement, reaching out to you like, oh my goodness, have you seen this one?
Mm-hmm.
Because there was so much great stuff in there. I mean, right from the get-go, with having Robert Lansing in it, both of us being Star Trek fans, seeing Gary Seven in something else, that alone is intriguing. But the whole world of 4D Man is a great place to visit.
We've got the connection to Star Trek, not just with Lansing. I mean, Lansing's probably the biggest one, but Lee Merriweather did an episode of Star Trek as well. There's a few other Star Trek connections here and there throughout it. But yeah, you got Robert Lansing in there, and I love the Assignment Earth episode of Star Trek. And I always wonder if there's some way to hop over to the Mirror universe of Star Trek to see if maybe Assignment Earth did get picked up as a series, to see where that would have taken us. Because I'd love to go into that alternate reality to watch that series. It seems cool.
Oh, totally. Yeah, for sure.
Really cool. And I know, not to get too nerdy, they did start to reference it a little bit in Star Trek Picard season 2, but still. Spoiler, by the way. I know the spoiler warning is supposed to come beforehand, but I did give you the blanket spoiler warning before this conversation started, so that counts. But yeah, I really like that setup, and I like him a lot. And I will say that when I first started watching this, I was a little taken aback by how cold and clinical he was. But I think that makes the journey he goes on that much more interesting, because he does loosen up a little bit, and then he starts to descend into whatever's happening to him. And I really liked it. I really liked his performance.
His performance is balanced so well in contrast to his brother, Tony.
Played by James Congdon, who I don't know anything about.
No, I don't know much about him either. All 3 of the leads in this really had television careers.
Yeah.
And James Congdon did a lot of TV.
Yeah, up to the mid-'80s, actually. So he did a lot.
All 3 leads in this, you kind of, looking at it now, kind of surprised that they didn't have bigger film careers.
Lee Merriweather. Fantastic.
Amazing. And this was one of her first movies.
Yeah, I think this is actually her very first film, isn't it? And
wow.
She did a bunch of TV before this. A handful of TV. And that was after she won Miss America, which is awesome. And she's great in this. And I really liked her as well. In fact, and she talks about this a little bit in an interview that she gave, that she had to kind of play this character naively because it was not the kind of character that had the kind of experience that she had, or the other way around, I suppose, when it comes to like love triangles and that sort of thing in relationships. So she really had to play the character, as she said in an interview, with a big V on her forehead for virgin. So the love triangle, the relationship triangle between the 3 of them, it's really interesting and not the kind of thing that I would have expected from a 1950s genre film produced by an organization that wants to focus on faith-based cinema.
That's a whole other avenue. Irvin Yeaworth in Pennsylvania had his production company, which I think was Good News Productions.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he was making other things like this, it was Fairview Productions, I think. and also Valley Forge Films, I think, was another title that they used. But it seemed like it was like an artist's commune of Christians that were trying to make faith-based movies. And to make money and to see if they could appeal to mainstream audiences, Shorty Yeworth took up Jack Harris on the offer to try to make sci-fi films, of which he wasn't particularly all that interested.
Right.
But he thought he'd give it a try. And The Blob was a surprise hit. In fact, the initial success of that movie is what generated the money that was rolled into making 4D Man.
And I know it's kind of used as kind of like a jokey moment in Tim Burton's Ed Wood film about how they were trying to get the church to make their Plan 9 from outer space so they can then later on make their Disciple movie or whatever, which may or may not have been how it really played out or oversimplification of what really happened. I know it's kind of played up for laughs, but that's what really was going on here. You know, they wanted to make some money so they can do their faith-based projects, and good for them, you know?
What I particularly like is the fact that, you know, you have Shorty Yeworth, devout Christian, making faith-based message, you know, movies. You had Bart Sloan, who was his special effects man, who would make animation for Christian films that did the special effects on this and The Blob. And then you also had Ralph Carmichael, who did the music for 4D Man and The Blob, who is kind of considered the forefather of, like, you know, popular Christian music.
Yeah.
And all three guys made, you know, these great sci-fi films with no necessary messaging or anything that I picked up on. They were just good films. And it seems like all three guys were just happy to try something different.
And I appreciate that. You know, I mean, you do you, whatever your faith is and whatever you're feeling called to do. And if your messaging may slip into something or whatever, but you don't have to be aware of that to enjoy these movies. The Blob, 4D Man, Dinosaurus, you know, and after watching an interview with Ralph Carmichael, the composer, and finding out that he was involved with like Billy Graham's productions and that sort of thing, I didn't realize that Billy Graham actually was involved in a lot of film production. I mean, Billy Graham being the evangelical pastor, I guess, preacher. Pastor, I think is the right term. I wasn't aware that he was involved in a lot of film production, but when I started doing a little bit of digging, you do start to see some of the more strong messaging in some of their films. Usually it's a character who's struggling with their faith or a character who uses his faith to get through something, that sort of thing. And that's cool, but I still kind of want to see some of these movies now because I really liked Ralph Carmichael's music. And the series of interviews that I saw with him, yeah, I mean, he's talking a lot about his faith-based music career, but he's also talking about working with Nat King Cole and doing Christmas records and putting on concerts.
Yeah, one interview I watched with him that I found really enjoyable and made me think that he's a great guy was the fact that he was talking about, you know, being a part of his church and being a part of the music program and realizing that his teenage daughter kept sneaking out to the car to listen to the radio. And later when he went to investigate, he realized she was listening to rock and roll. And he came to the conclusion that, well, if that's what kids want to hear, that's what we need to bring into the church. And that he had a lot of pushback for that.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you know, the church has always been slow to adapt, you know, with the printing press and choral music. And this is just one more step in that. And he took his musical skills and applied it to something he believed in and kind of invented a whole new genre of Christian music. It's just a wild trip. It's interesting that a couple genre pictures made strange bedfellows with you know, a lot of Christian filmmakers who also happen to make some really interesting sci-fi films.
Yeah, I really like The Blob a lot. I feel like it doesn't get talked about in the same breath sometimes as things like our Universal classics or the Hammer films, but I really like The Blob a whole bunch. I got a little piece of The Blob that was gifted to me by a friend of the show, Joseph Schultz, and you know, it's got right now it's not on my bookshelf because I'm packing up the office and the office is a disaster, but I know exactly where it's at right now, and it will have a place of homage or a very, this will be nicely displayed when I finally get landed down in Arizona. Although I am a little worried because the way to stop the blob is to keep it cold, and I'm taking it to Arizona, so we may be in trouble. Watch the news, folks.
Well, and speaking of the Blob,
yeah,
from what I've read, Steve McQueen was supposed to be one of the leads in 4D Man, but his career had already kind of taken off, and they found him kind of difficult to work with. So that's kind of one of the ways we ended up with a different casting going into 4D Man and getting Robert Lansing in his place.
Go through the archives, folks, of Monster Kid Radio and find the Monster Kid Radio episodes from Monster Bash with Chris Hayworth Jr. as a special guest doing a Q&A. He talks about growing up in that filmmaking family and that collective there, and some of his adventures on set, that sort of thing, and his interactions with Steve McQueen and some of the rest of the cast from The Blob. Interesting stuff. I don't know if I'd like this movie as much if it was Steve McQueen, although he would have been more appropriately aged for the character as opposed to being the world's oldest teenager in The Blob. But I really like the cast we ended up with a lot.
Yeah, the only person I could kind of see changing out is maybe James Congdon. He starts out strong, but as it goes on, I could see someone else playing that part maybe. Overall, I love the cast of 4D Man. It seems like The Blob was sci-fi fun, kind of teenager based. I feel like 4D Man was a more mature film for Harrison Yeaworth, where you have these two brothers that are they're there for each other, but they're also rivals. They're both scientists. Also, the fact that it's a love triangle and the fact that, Tony had already taken someone away from Scott in the past. Like, there's a lot of drama there, and that tension is great. And the music, too. The music, too, was also seemed more complex of that era.
I want to go back to the love triangle and taking a woman from him, and that sort of taking a woman, like their property. But that kind of caught me by surprise the first time I saw this. I was a little shocked because I didn't expect something that complex. But then also I feel like the film subverted my expectations a little bit because the way it starts, Dr. Tony Nelson, is painted as the one that's a little bit more impulsive, a little bit more, I hate to say the word irresponsible, but the one who's a little bit more willing to take crazy chances, that sort of thing.
Well, spoiler, the first thing he does is burn down a lab where he works.
So that happens, and so I'm like, oh, okay, so he's going to become the 4D Man. Because when I first saw it, I hadn't seen the trailers.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. So, I'm watching this, and then it turns out it's the other brother. It's Dr. Scott Nelson. I was surprised. I was shocked. It took me for a little bit of a loop. My expectations were totally subverted. And I love this film for that. Because I didn't expect.
Yeah, me too. I kind of wonder if that's the part of the reason this movie isn't better known or better loved, in the sense that it does subvert your expectations and twists on things that maybe you wouldn't expect in a genre film like this.
Maybe, yeah.
I like it for the fact of how it's different from other things, but maybe for some people it just was too different.
Maybe. And you said the spectacle of somebody walking through walls, which is cool, and the special effects, and we'll talk about that here in a second, are super cool. But when you think about the three films that we've mentioned here, this one and the other two, The Blob and Dinosaurus have much bigger spectacles. That might have been one of the reason why as well, that this one just didn't do as well. I don't know. I really dig it. It got almost some noir-like elements to it too. And I love me a good film noir. I keep threatening to do a film noir day again on the Twitch stream. Once I get landed in Arizona, I probably will. And so I've got some of those elements here. Maybe it's just the music that makes me feel film noir-y, because the music has that kind of jazzy kind of thing going on, and I dig that so much.
No, I think that there's quite a few noir qualities to it. Some of the lighting, some of the framing, the way that the characters evolve, the fact that there is a romance in the middle of it that kind of twists people's perspectives a bit, and plays with their egos and their jealousy. No, I think there's a lot of noir there. In fact, it'd be interesting to kind of take a look and see how many sci-fi films you can put into a category of noir. This would definitely be on that list.
Yeah, like this, The Amazing Transparent Man. I can think of a few others. Of course, that was directed by Edgar Ulmer, who did Detour, and which is a classic film noir.
Right.
But there's some really cool noir elements. But then you got the special effects stuff too. And, you know, one of the things that I love about some of these older movies is the DIY aesthetic, is being able to see something and rooting for them because you kind of know how they did it. You can kind of see what they're going for and how they put things together. And some of these effects are so simply done, but so effective. I can't help but kind of cheer for them. It's like, oh my gosh, you pulled that off with just some interesting lighting and removing a plate of glass.
Yeah. When he goes to try to grab that apple,
perfect.
That's some of the most brilliant and simple and elegant special effects ever, with just a strip of light in place of the pane of glass for his arm to pass through. Looks so great. I wish that they would have kept that up for another time where he reaches for something through a window. They didn't. And maybe that was time or budget or whatever, but there's a few inconsistencies, and some of the effects are unbelievably good, especially for being a regional production done outside of Hollywood.
Yeah.
And there's some other moments where you're like, well, it's fun. Could be a little better, but it's fun. But overall, I think the movie holds up very, very well.
We were talking before we hit record here about the Blu-ray. I don't own the Blu-ray. I wish I did. I'd like to see it in blue, but I suspect because some of these effects are just so practically and elegantly done, they're going to hold up. You know, I remember when we saw years ago, I went to see the original War of the Worlds at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. They did their big sci-fi thing, and they were showing a bunch of science fiction movies on their big near IMAX screen. And we saw War of the Worlds there, and it was huge and blown up, and you could see every single wire holding up the flying saucers because it had been so blown up and touched up a little bit. Whereas something like that scene where he's going and picking out that apple in 4D, man, that's going to hold up no matter how big and how restored you make your picture because of what it is. And I love that. I love that so much about some of these movies. And you mentioned regional filmmaking. I love regional filmmaking. I love digging into like different aspects and corners of the country, seeing what kind of movies were being generated, especially genre films, up to and including things like The Evil Dead in 1981, you know, being a regional film technically. You got all the stuff happening down in Florida at the time. You've got films like this. It's just a different vibe, you know? And it almost feels more sincere because they know they're competing with what's coming out of Hollywood.
Yeah, and I think that it also brought new voices and new approaches that you weren't necessarily seeing in the regular factory system of Hollywood at the time.
Yeah.
If anybody knows of any great books or documentaries about the Pennsylvania group that was behind The Blob and 4D Man and Dinosaurus, please let us know, because I would love to learn more about their efforts.
Yeah, I think there is an autobiography or something.
I know that Jack Harris wrote a book.
Yeah.
I don't know if Irvin Yeworth or his son wrote a book or not. Something about this movie and the other two, it's like a lot of the people involved are no longer with us, but these movies are such a legacy and such a treasure that more people really need to discover them, I think. 4D Man, people will see familiar faces, but there's stories behind what you don't see on camera. And knowing that they put so much effort into it.
I still can't get over Lee Merriweather being in this movie. Catwoman being in, this low budget science fiction flick. I love it. And she's just fantastic in it. And all the interviews that I saw with her, whether it was a copy of the interview from the Blu-ray that somebody put on YouTube or somebody talking to her at a Comic-Con, because, Catwoman, she never had anything negative to say. She's like, yep, this is a science fiction movie that I made, and only time I was uncomfortable is when they told me I'd be staying at this dude's house, and I thought that was a little weird until I found out it was this dude and his family's house, and okay, I didn't feel as awkward anymore. And it's like, she never really talked down about it, and that's awesome.
And the fact that it was such a family operation, like I'd seen that interview, and the way she lights up knowing that, she was staying at the director's house, but also with his wife and his family and his kids. And I'd seen other stories where Yeworth's family would make food for the entire crew.
Yeah.
Like they didn't bring in caterers. They just did it all family style. Let's make a big pot of spaghetti and keep working. which is really charming and fun. And it's nice to see that they were able to pull off these movies that are spectacles. It's great that, the region still celebrates the Blob every year with Blob Fest, which would be a nice bucket list trip to do someday, just to see all the love and to see it at the Colonial Theater.
We got to.
And now and then they have done 4D Man as one of the extra showings, and to see those films in a theater would be just worth the price of airline tickets to do it.
We have to do it.
Yeah,
we have to go at some point. Have to. So at one point, this was released with the title Master of Terror in 1965. I don't like that title at all.
I also saw The Evil Force as a alternate title.
Oh.
And originally they were talking about calling it The Fourth Dimensional Man.
You know what? That kind of works too, I guess. But I think 40 minutes is perfect. So it was released as part of a double feature with Masterworks of Terror, which is an Argentinian film, which I kind of want to see now.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
No, neither have I, but it is a collection of Edgar Allan Poe stories. It's an anthology film. I'm trying to imagine 3 Edgar Allan Poe, Gothic films and 4D Man. Like, what?
Yeah, I'm not seeing Edgar Allan Poe crossover. Maybe it's my own imagination not being big enough, but I don't see it.
Well, and it's interesting. You watch those interviews with Jack Harris. He tells an interesting story about how he got the idea for this. Now, I've seen some other conflicting bits of information, but Jack Harris talks about how he was he saw a cover of Weird Tales magazine. So there's your Edgar Allan Poe connection.
Okay.
A copy of Weird Tales magazine and an image of a man walking through a wall. And he's like, that's something there. We should do a story about that. And then he called Shorty, and that was the genesis of 4D Man. If that's the case, that's awesome. Get a little Weird Tales action in there, and maybe even justify showing this at the Lovecraft Film Festival someday, or some other similar film festival. But then I also did some digging, and there was a movie in 1951 that came out in France called Mr. Peekaboo, about a guy who can start walking through walls, but it's more of a comedy, kind of a comic, slapsticky kind of French thing. I've never seen it. I don't know anything about it. But according to the Internet Movie Database, which is absolutely never wrong, 4D Man is an uncredited remake or reversion, reboot, whatever you want to call it, of this film. Listeners, if you've seen Mr. Peekaboo, let me know. I'd be curious to check it out. Like I said, I've never seen it.
We've talked about how this was Lee Merriweather's first big movie.
Yeah.
Another Academy Award-winning actress was also in this film, and it's one of her early debuts on the big screen.
Right.
Miss Patty Duke. And it's a small part, but she's great. She was Lee Merriweather's niece or little sister, I can't quite recall.
How did they find these people?
Right?
In this film. How did you find Lee Merriweather, who would go on to have this ongoing career? How did you find Patty freaking Duke?
Well, and how could you convince them to do this regional film?
Yeah.
Versus something in LA? Because I think Patty Duke was already on Broadway doing stuff. Mm-hmm. I know that Jack Harris was kind of New York based. So I don't know, was he catching plays and going like, oh, there's somebody. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, this was just 3 years away from The Miracle Worker.
Right.
That's where she won the award, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Playing Helen Keller, right?
Yeah. Just what? How did that happen? If anybody was to go on to have like sure, you got Steve McQueen in The Blob, cool. And he would go on to become the megastar that he was. But to have somebody who would go on to win an Academy Award turn up in your little science fiction thriller.
Well, and I believe that Steve McQueen, that they discovered him when he was doing stuff in New York too, was doing theater.
That's true. So maybe that's the connection.
Maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. Because Jack Harris and them, they were involved in some film distribution and kind of exploitation of properties and that sort of thing, and kind of being aware of that. So maybe that was the connection. Maybe that's how they found it. I keep meaning to go back and reread, or excuse me, not reread, but to read the Jack Harris book. I've never read it. But now I'm really curious too.
Now, speaking of Jack Harris, he was definitely into using the skills of B pictures as far as the way that they were promoted. You know, like big sensational titles and gimmicks. And one was that on some of the posters that I've seen, there was him offering up $1 million for anyone who could duplicate the feats of the 4D man.
Yeah.
You know anything about that?
Yeah, so I was saying a second ago that he was involved in like exploitation and that sort of thing, some promotion, the ballyhoo of these films. And that's something that I absolutely adore about this era of filmmaking and film distribution are the gimmicks, and not just, the William Castle style, skeletons fly down from the ceiling type gimmicks, but the big displays he would put up at the front of the movie theaters. I know you and I have even talked about, the big ant display in Matinee for the movie Mant, all that kind of stuff. I love that. Or the different handing out vomit bags or barf bags for things. I love that extra mile that people will go to make that experience bigger and more attractive for more audiences. And Jack Harris took out, I'm putting in quotes, an insurance policy with, was it Lloyd's of London? That if anybody could duplicate that effect or that, effect, or, in real life, they'll get paid a huge chunk of money. I love that. Awesome thing to put on a poster and your promotional material.
I kind of wish some of that would make its way back.
I miss it too. I know, right?
Maybe with social media and how cynical everyone seems to be, maybe you couldn't pull it off, but boy, it would be a treat to walk into a movie theater with some of that.
Yeah. Oh, it would be so cool. It just adds to the whole thing, I feel like.
Yeah, especially in this time where a lot of theaters are struggling to get people to put down their remotes and streaming and come in to see a big screen film with an audience. I think a little bit of ballyhoo might get a few more people in there.
I think so. I mean, the film should probably speak for itself as well, and I can't speak for it, but like Borderlands just bombed. Could some sort of ballyhoo saved that? I don't know. I think the closest we get now are the custom popcorn buckets.
Yeah. And a few cardboard displays set up in lobbies.
Yeah, and that's about it. I mean, you and I both worked for movie theaters.
Right.
I worked for a video store, so we had some of that kind of stuff, but I want more.
Nothing like those glory days and $1 million policies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So fun. So cool. So cool. And this movie is just so cool. I mean, I really dig it a lot. This is one that I would show Beth. I would show my wife. I choose my battles pretty carefully when I decide what movies I'm going to show her. Sometimes I know better than to show her some things. I did take a risk when I showed her Manos, the Hands of Fate, but she was on board with it.
She's a keeper.
Yeah.
True.
Yep. There you go. She's not going anywhere. But I'm not going to show her Fun in Balloon Land, for example. Just anyway, this is one I'd show Beth.
The 4D Man is wonderful.
It's got, the relationships. It's got the characters. And it's got, those, I think you put it best when you called them elegant. The special effects are just elegant. They just work really, really well.
Right. And there are things in this movie that you could say have been borrowed from other films. When Scott is needing energy to continue to survive and be the 4D man and running into little Patty Duke, I couldn't help but think of Frankenstein and the little girl.
Ooh.
And also as Scott continues to, he's lost the woman he loves. He's not getting the credit for his work on Cargonite, and he's starting to slip into madness. I also kept thinking of The Invisible Man, that it was very much like The Invisible Man to me, where yes, he's gaining power and ability, but at the same time, he's sort of losing his mind.
I can see The Invisible Man. Frankenstein, though, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that.
I also thought of a couple other movies, and we'll see if you get a laugh out of it. Combined with the jazzy bebop score and the lab setting and lab stuff going awry, I couldn't help but think of the Disney movies with Kurt Russell, like The World's Strongest Man and the Computer Who Wore Sneakers. Like, those movies also came to mind. Like, those feel like comedic riffs off of 4D Man in a lot of ways.
I don't know if I'm going to catch any flack for this or not. I don't think so. I love those movies. They're
me too.
And I have a lot of positive memories with those. I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies growing up. If it was rated R, I wasn't allowed to watch it. So whenever we went to the video store, I was allowed to look at the science fiction, but not the horror movies. So the closest that I would get to anything super fantastical or whatever was a lot of times a Disney flick. So all of those Disney movies, those live action fanciful movies, especially the Kurt Russell ones, what's the one where they're hypnotizing somebody? I don't know, but yeah, the computer wore tennis shoes, the original Flubber, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the music, the lab setting, all those things.
The music's fantastic. Now I want to talk about those movies here on MKR. What do you think, listeners? Should I do the Kurt Russell Disney sci-fi-ish kind of movies? I know Scott Morris and Tracy Morris would be up for it. I'm from Disney, Indiana, so
I'd be up for that too. Those movies are a lot of fun.
They really are. They all kind of take place in the same weird cinematic universe, kind of, in that it's school and lab, but not
right.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the college.
Medfield College. No, those are fun. And I totally could see that kind of lab setting. And we're about to get into the 60s where things get a little different, but we're still in the 50s where you've still got the scientist as hero. In this case, you've also got scientist as villain, but you've got the scientist working with the law enforcement and nobody's giving the scientist any grief for doing so. Whereas in later genre films, a lot of times the scientist is trying to convince the law enforcement to do something. The law enforcement's like, you're just a scientist. You don't know any better. That's not how the real world works. Shoot to kill if we have to. And I know they'd say that in this here too, but it still feels like we're trusting science or the scientist characters. So I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I think this movie deserves more credit for its place in time and kind of the way that it touches on familiar things that you're already seeing in films, like you were saying about the scientists. But it also starts leading a little bit in ways, in kind of giving you hints at the darker side of things, and also the romantic triangle there, and the juxtaposition of the brothers who were rivals. And you start thinking one's the villain who ends up being sort of the hero, and the one that you think's the hero ends up being sort of the villain. And the music was ahead of its time. And I know that the music is very polarizing for some people who like genre films. Like you and I, we love it. There are other people who absolutely hate it and takes them out of this movie. But I think I would argue that you need to watch it with the perspective of when it was made and take it as a whole. Not breaking it necessarily into differences, but just enjoying it as a cinematic experience.
No, I know that there are other podcasters even who don't like the score, but I dig it, man. I really do. And it's something different.
Right.
And that's something that I really appreciate is having this different approach to the music, to the score, to the orchestration. It's a little jazzier, so it does kind of play into some of the film noir like filming techniques that we're seeing here, or filming that we're seeing here. Who was the cinematographer on this, actually? I wonder.
Theodore Powell. He shot a lot of movies. In fact, he shot a lot of stuff in Mexico under another name.
Oh, okay.
And he worked all the way from he was shooting films in 1927. East Side, West Side, 1927. The Jazz Age, 1929. Then I know he shot a bunch of movies in Mexico. I know that he shot a lot of movies. I have to look at a different source.
He apparently was the cinematographer on a classic commercial for Alka-Seltzer. That's a spicy meatball. Yeah, he shot that. But no, I really like the cinematography on this. And knowing that he did a lot of stuff down in Mexico, I could see that. This has a slight Mexican vibe to some of the lighting and camera placements. And I say that as somebody and I don't think that that's a negative thing. I say that as somebody who's watched a lot of Mexican genre cinema, both luchadors and otherwise. And there are a lot of setups in this that made me that I could see being used in Mexico, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It kind of looks like 4D Man was probably his last film.
His last big film, yeah.
Yeah. But he has 76 credits in cinematography on IMDb, so
did quite a
definitely had a lot of work.
Yeah. just interesting, man. Just interesting film. And the people that were involved with it, again, we look at Dinosaurus and The Blob and this one all being so different from each other, but all still kind of serving the same purpose, which is to get the studio going so they can keep making their faith-based films, of which I've not seen any. But like I said, I do want to go back and watch them because this is music, nothing else.
Yeah, it's interesting that they did such diverse work.
Jack Harris would also be involved in the distribution of another favorite film of mine, another regional film, Equinox from 1970. Have you seen this?
I have not seen Equinox.
Dude, I love Equinox. So it's basically a student film that Dennis Buren worked on.
Oh, I've heard of it, but no, I've never seen it.
Yeah. So it's got a lot of people that would go on to do other things in the industry, special effects wise, things like that. It's got some stop motion. It's got some forced perspective. It's just a neat little movie. I really like it. And maybe that's the next movie you and I talk about here on the show.
I'm game. That sounds great. I love Dennis Buren and his special effects work. So I'd love to see more of a story from him as well.
And I believe Criterion has released Equinox. That's how much of a big deal it is.
Wow.
For people that care about film. So I highly recommend it. Anything else you want to say about 4D Man?
No, other than that, I really enjoyed it. And I wish that more people would find it and give it a chance and, kind of leave your expectations at the door and just enjoy the experience. Because there's a lot of great stuff here that anyone who loves sci-fi or genre film, I think they're in for a real treat. The special effects are great. The characters are great. We didn't talk about some of the supporting cast. The head of the Institute for Cargonite, he's great. The security guard, who I can't remember his name, he's also in Star Trek. Like, there's a lot of great little bit parts that really shine around the three leads. And the three leads are great.
I'm thinking The Incredible Shrinking Man, to go back to something you said a second ago about different movies that you could see maybe being influenced by or having taken influence from, or vice versa. When Dr. Nelson is out at the bar picking up the woman.
Oh, right.
Incredible Shrinking Man moment right there where he's off doing his thing and he's picking somebody up.
Also note, Jack Harris, producer of the film, is in the bar scene as an extra.
I was watching for him, but I didn't see him. I couldn't make him out. Were you able to see him?
Only after doing some research, after having read that he was in the scene and seeing some stills where he's isolated, I could pick him out. Yeah, I've watched this movie 3 times now, and I still love it and appreciate it.
It makes me think about... I've been kind of reflective lately, and you're probably the best guest to have on for something like this, about our film school days, partly because I've been... packing up, getting ready to make the move to Arizona. And I stumbled across a whole bunch of photos that I took when I was making movies in Cheyenne, Wyoming, before I ended up in Bozeman, Montana at MSU. And photos from the film that I shot for that. And you were there for it. I mean, you kind of co-directed that short film, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, Wrong Number. I found the photos from that stashed away in a box. And just thinking about the different things we tried to do for special effects and things that we just tried to will into existence. And I feel like with some of the best regional films like this one, they work because their will was stronger than their budget or limitations. Yeah. They just willed so much of this into existence by just figuring out a way to make it happen. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of what we were trying to do back in the day. And like I said, I've been going through the photos and I'm looking to go back to school in Arizona, maybe even going back into film school. So I've been kind of thinking about that again. I don't know. I need to find a Jack Harris to produce my movie efforts. I think that's what we need. We need to find a Jack Harris. Did he have any kids? Let's see if he's in the industry.
Yeah. We need to find more people.
Yeah.
That special magic touch of finances to start a Jack Harris and a Ralph Carmichael who has brilliant musical skill that defies several genres.
Yeah.
And Irvin Shorty Yeaworth, who was like the eternal optimist and was happy to try to make any kind of movie. A partner like that would be great.
That's what we need. So listeners, if you have Jack Harris money, well, Matt, what are you up to these days, man?
I am excited about the fact that a place near and dear to monster kids in the Portland, Oregon metro, the Joy Cinema, is going to have Vincent Price's House of Wax in 3D. I've seen it on television as a kid, never seen it on a big screen, never in 3D. I'm pretty excited about that. That would be great to see.
I feel like they played Deadpool and Wolverine and then decided, you know what, we're just going to show whatever we want. So they've been showing The Goonies. They showed North by Northwest, which is awesome. And then, as of this recording, we are getting ready for American Graffiti and House of Wax in 3D. That's an interesting double feature. I don't think I'm going to make both of them, but I'm going to move heaven and everything else to try to get to House of Wax in 3D on Sunday night. Got to see it one more time, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
So listeners, if you're in the area, Sunday is September 1st. It is showing Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Go to thejoycinema.com for ticket prices and everything else. And hopefully we'll see you there. I think Matt has made it pretty clear he's going to try to be there. I'm going to try to be there as well. And Beth will be back in town. She's been down in Arizona the past few weeks, starting her new job and making room at my mother's house for us to move into, for us and Wednesday to move into. She's going to be flying back up here to help finish packing. But I did tell her about House of Wax in 3D, and she'd like to go to the Joy Cinema one more time too before she makes the move permanently, before we make the move down to Arizona. So Sunday, September 1st, 8:30 p.m., call it a Monster Kid Radio crash, call it a good time, call it whatever you want. And I'm going to reach out to Jeff today and see if I can introduce the film one more time.
Monster Kid Radio, Joy Cinema, Vincent Price. Does it get better than that?
You know I'm bringing my recorder.
Excellent.
It's going to be a good time. It was a good time talking about 4D Man as well. I know at some point, like I said, Matt and I will talk about Equinox. Don't know if he realizes he signed up for that or not, but yeah, we'll talk about Equinox in the future as well. We'll talk about House of Wax and who knows what else, but I like having you on the show, dude. So we'll find more things to talk about, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And if, we need to cross over to the fourth dimension to make it happen via Zoom or whatever other technology as you head south, we need to keep up these conversations. It's definitely a highlight.
We do definitely. I've got a lot of mixed feelings about moving. I do consider myself a Portlander at this point, even though I live in Vancouver. I do consider myself a Pacific Northwesterner, I suppose. I've been in the area for over 20 years. And I've got some amazing friendships, some that I had to rekindle once I got up here after a while, like with you, or people that I've met up here, like Jeff or Tom, and others. Of course, I'm sure I'm missing people, but we are going to try to keep in touch with everybody that has become part of Monster Kid Radio's cast of irregulars in the Pacific Northwest through Zoom, Skype, whatever we need to do. We'll have Matt back on, and we'll have Jeff Polier and Tom Doffel and all the others as much as we can, even though Monster Kid Radio Central is relocating. So listeners who have written in and said that they appreciate hearing Matt and I talk about movies, there's a couple of old friends, because that's, well, technically what we are, or classic friends, I guess is what I said. That will continue. We're going to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, MKR is family. I'm more than honored to be your friend and to be a MKR irregular. So
there you go. And one last thing before we sign off, I said this on Facebook. I want to say it on the podcast. Congratulations to Matt and his wife, Jennifer, who just celebrated 25 years of marriage as of yesterday. She still hasn't found out that deep, dark secret and hasn't left him yet. So that was a really terrible thing for a friend to say, but I thought it was funny at the time.
That's still funny now. I haven't been able to scare her off with my choice and taste in cinema, so I think we'll last the test of time here. Very so. Lucky.
I hope so. I love you both, and you're both meant for each other. So congratulations.
Thank you.
In 1957, something came around. The molten meteor came crashing down. It changed forevermore the face of the sleepy old town. It brought horror, chills, and laughter all at the same time. And 50 years later, people still stand in line to run out of the theater being chased by that giant red slime. Well, it landed out in Chester Springs where no one was around. Slowly poked the stick at it, which bar turned upside down. And it might have died out there because there was nothing around left to eat. We know it didn't like Pepsi. But Steve McQueen drove it into town at a breakneck pace. It ate Stephen Chase and the nurse at old Doc Deuce's place. Pretty soon it threatened the entire human race. One night in 57 was all that it took to make its name famous in the cinema books. Jack, Ted, and Shorty, Steve, and Nita, Gene, Ralph, and Bert was Bill, Vince, and Tom, but only Eli got hurt. So if someone comes to town and says, "Does anything ever happen around here?" you can refer them to my favorite year. That night in 57 when the monster came to town. Come on, everybody, let's go look for it, all right?
Downingtown headquarters, this is Phoenixville. We have a report of some rowdy teenagers at the Colonial Theater acting up at the midnight spook show. There's probably nothing to it, but we're asking you to stand by while we go to check it out. In case these crazy kids get out of hand and we need backup. I don't know what these teens are thinking. We'll never get through the 50s at this rate. Over.
Well, before it left the continent, it sure got around. From Chester Springs to Phoenixville and Downingtown. It stopped at Jerry's Market and Rofo, where we all got a clue. But even though the grown-ups wouldn't listen to the teens, they finally got together and they all found the means to see the sunrise after the longest night in local history. One night in 57 was all that it took to make his name famous in the cinema books. Jack, Ted, and Shorty, Steve, and Nita, Gene, Ralph, and Bert was Bill, Vince, and Tom, but only Eli got hurt. So someone comes to town and asks, "Doesn't anything ever happen around here?" You can refer them to my favorite year. That night in 57 when the monster came to town. Oh yeah. That night in 57 when the molten meteor crashed down. Oh, that night in 57 when the monster came to town.
Mamma mia, that's some species.
Cut. Spicy meatballs, Jack. Sorry. Take 28. Out, Tony. And action.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut. What was the matter with that? The accent. Huh. Cut. Cut.
Micey, micey, ballsy, ballsy.
Cut. Take 59. And action.
Sometimes you eat more than you should. And when it's spicy besides, Mamma Mia, do you need Alka-Seltzer? Alka-Seltzer can help unstuff you, relieve the acid indigestion, and help make you your old self again.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
Cut. Okay. Let's break for lunch.
Dexter, come on, start the test.
The computer wore tennis shoes and a twinkle in his eye. Never met a groovier dude, an electric kind of guy. A guy that graced and amazed and otherwise faced the whole darn human race. Making the news, in his shoes, that turned on uptight, right out of sight, totally together, computer in tennis shoes.
When a campus clown underwent an accidental brain transplant with a high-speed computer, the whole world was after his head. Now Now the young generation gets into gear, and the laughs are all on the establishment. The computer wore tennis shoes, coming soon.
Didn't necessarily mean to get so personal there at the end of the conversation with Matt regarding, our film school background and all of that, and moving and packing. I'm just feeling a little bit more reflective these days because I am in the midst of packing up the rest of our life here and getting it down to Arizona, where Beth is already working. I've got some job applications out there, and I'm really hopeful that one of them is going to snag me a job. I'm looking forward to getting started with employment down in Arizona and getting our life down there started as well. And I'm just, like I said, feeling a little bit reflective, not necessarily maudlin, but just kind of looking back at the, past 20 plus years of living up here in the Pacific Northwest. So that kind of crept into the end of the conversation there with Matt. My apologies for that. I didn't mean to hijack what was, I thought, a very cool conversation about a very cool film. Really dig 4D Man. And there's a lot more to talk about with that movie that Matt and I actually realized we missed a whole bunch of stuff when I stopped recording, but we just kept chatting. And, well, guess I'll just have to talk about 4D Man again at some point in the future here on MKR. Definitely going to have Matt back on, though, to talk about Equinox. That should be a fun time. And I did a little digging, and it turns out I didn't realize this at the time. I suppose I probably should have, because I really liked this movie. Jack Harris also was the executive producer of John Carpenter's first film, Dark Star, first theatrical release, Dark Star, in 1974. It is a comedy science fiction film that he did with Dan O'Bannon. I dig that movie, man. That one is goofy, fun, and unlike anything John Carpenter would do after that. But I like it a lot. I like it a whole lot. Maybe we'll talk about Dark Star someday here on the show as well. But next up from Matt, anyway, will be Equinox in the very near future, I hope. You can keep up with Monster Kid Radio over at monsterkidradio.net. You're going to find links to everything that we've got going on here at Monster Kid Radio, including all of our social media outlets, Facebook, X, Reddit, Patreon, Discord. It's all there, so please check out what we've got going on over at monsterkidradio.net. You can share posts on Facebook, retweet tweets on X, or re-X them, I guess. I don't know what they call it there anymore. I'm still relearning the X environment, however it is they work, the infrastructure over there. Anyway, please check us out over there and follow us and give us likes and review the podcast even if you get an opportunity to do so. What's coming up next week on the show? I'm not entirely sure. I'll be completely honest. I have a couple of recordings that have been sent in from multiple people. I've got another recording from Monster Bash 2024, courtesy of Mike R. And then Steve Turek has also sent me a recording of he and Kevin Slick talking about the movie M. Now, we have talked about the movie M in the past here on the show, but we haven't talked about it with Kevin or Steve, so it'll be a brand new conversation. One of those two things is happening next week. I'll try to get a little bit more firm plans in place within the next few days. Stay tuned to Facebook and Twitter or X, because I'll make announcements there first about what's coming up on the next episode of MKR. Also, Monster Kid Radio mystery boxes are back on sale for $65. I will stuff a medium-sized flat rate box full of Monster Kid Radio stuff from the MKR archives. We're talking books, magazines, movies, toys, collectibles. Who knows? It's a mystery. If you're in the United States, because that's the only place I can really do shipping to right now for this, unless we're going to up how much it costs, for $65, I will get a box in the mail for you. And hey, you're helping me with moving costs. You're doing me a solid. Plus, I got a lot of stuff here that I just can't take with me to Arizona. I'd love for it to go to a Monster Kid home. So email me at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, and I'll let you know how you can get your hands on your very own Monster Kid Radio mystery box. 3 of you have already picked one up. There are only 7 left. Get in on it now. Email me, and I'll let you know how you can submit payment. I'll get your address, and you'll get your own mystery box from Monster Kid Radio Central within the next week or two.
Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death or other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, Monster Kid Writer, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. That's teamdeath.com. Please rate and review Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
Get the Shoe Phone is copyright 2005. Secret Audio Suspense is the name of the album. You can find it. It's by The Unidentified at theunidentified.bandcamp.com. Go check out that album. But also, I was told that this band actually is no more. So go buy the album, but then also check out Black Transmitter, Soviet Hiroshi. Those are the two projects that Hugo from The Unidentified is involved with these days. Go check those out as well. But follow the link in the show notes to get the Shoe Phone. I dig it. I think you're going to like it too. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'll talk to everybody next week. Ciao.